One scorching afternoon, filled with the whims of wealthy patrons, changed her life forever. She was a waitress on the verge of burnout, drained by night shifts and endless studying, until he appeared, confident, mature, attentive. Soon, luxury getaways, a fairy tale wedding, and a dream home became her new reality. But in a world that glitters, the deepest cracks hide beneath the shine, a loneliness no amount of wine or flowers could soothe. One chance encounter, and her heart started racing again. One kiss, and everything spiraled out of control. Scandal, betrayal, infidelity, a viral video, and the complete loss of everything. What do you do when all that's left of your former life is pain and a suitcase in your hand? That's when the real transformation begins. Not pretty, not glamorous, but raw and purifying. And from that moment on, everything is real. Hello, my friend. I'm so glad you stopped by my channel. If you're here for the first time, don't forget to subscribe and share this video with your friends or family. It really helps my channel a lot. Please tell me in which city or country you watched this video. I value every one of your comments. So, let's get started. I never would have guessed that something as ordinary as a piece of sports gear could completely change the course of my life. But that's precisely what happened. At 28, I was burning the candle at both ends, working late shifts at an exclusive country club, while squeezing in classes for my psychology degree. The job was anything but glamorous, but it helped me keep my head above water. Thinking back, I had no clue that a single afternoon would flip my entire reality upside down. The heat that day was so intense, it seemed to make the air ripple, and the club buzzed with well-to-do members dressed in spotless polos and immaculate visors. I weaved between tables, balancing trays and forcing my brightest customer service grin. Then, one guest decided to make my already tough day worse. He nitpicked everything. His drink wasn't cold enough, the service too slow, nothing could satisfy him. My patience was about to snap when a calm, authoritative voice cut through the tension. "Is there an issue here?" I turned to see Matthew, tall, sun-bronzed, with distinguished streaks of gray at his temples. He was 37, and every year suited him. In just a few words, Matthew shut down the difficult guest with an effortless confidence that immediately eased my nerves. When my shift wrapped up, Matthew was waiting for me at the bar. We got to talking, and before I knew it, hours had melted away. He was sharp, charming, and somehow made me feel like I was the center of the universe. I couldn't help but get swept up in it. From that point on, we were nearly inseparable. Matthew introduced me to a world I'd only ever glimpsed in films, elegant dinners, spontaneous weekend getaways, and yes, he tried teaching me golf, even though my swing remained hopeless. For the first time in my life, I felt valued and truly seen. In just 8 months, we went from strangers to husband and wife. It sounds reckless in retrospect, but back then, it felt like fate. Our wedding was the stuff of fairy tales. I wore a dress I'd never dared to picture myself in. Matthew looked dashing in his tuxedo, and our loved ones gathered as we pledged forever. As we swayed together during our first dance, Matthew leaned in and murmured, "You've made me the happiest man alive, Vanessa." I believed him with all my heart. If only I'd known my fairy tale ending would soon become a cautionary tale. That's how life works, isn't it? The biggest dangers remain hidden until you walk right into them. And I was heading straight for one. In the beginning, being Mrs. Matthew Thornton felt like a dream come true. Our honeymoon in Bali was pure paradise. Luxurious villas, unforgettable sunsets, and more champagne than I could ever drink. I was certain I'd finally arrived. Once back home, we settled into a house so beautiful it made my old apartment seem like a storage closet. Each morning began with the rich aroma of coffee from a high-end machine worth more than my first car. Matthew, always impeccably dressed, would kiss me goodbye before heading to the office. It felt as though I was living someone else's life. But, as the saying goes, looks can be deceiving. Almost without me noticing, things began to change. Matthew started spending more weekends out on the golf course. At first, he'd only be gone now and then. Soon, it was every other weekend. Eventually, I was having longer conversations with our housekeeper than with my husband. I tried to fill the emptiness, buried myself in textbooks, joined a book club, even gave gardening a shot. Let's just say plants and I aren't meant to be. But after you've moved the couch for the 10th time, the quiet becomes suffocating. Loneliness seeped in quietly, dense as fog. I'd find myself counting the hours until Matthew came home, only for him to collapse in front of the TV, more interested in sports than in talking to me. Our conversations became rote, like we were reciting lines in a play. How was your day? Good. Yours? Good. Repeat, day in and day out. I felt less like a partner and more like a trophy, displayed on a shelf and gathering dust. The lavish life I thought I'd won began to feel more like a well-upholstered prison. One night, alone in our echoing living room, a glass of wine in hand, I looked at my phone, and it hit me. I was only 27. How had I ended up here, waiting for scraps of attention from my own husband? That restless itch started to grow inside me. I longed for adventure, connection, that rush I used to get whenever Matthew smiled at me. Unbeknownst to me, that craving for something new was about to set off a series of events I never could have predicted. People say the road to ruin is paved with the best of intentions, right? I was about to find out for myself. I was desperate for anything to shake up the routine, so when Matthew announced he'd be leaving for yet another golf weekend, I jumped at the opportunity. 3 days stretched ahead of me, wide open and unplanned. Hungry for some excitement, I called my friend Jenna and begged her for a night out. Let's go all out, I said, feeling like a rebellious teen sneaking out past curfew. We landed at a hip downtown bar, neon lights, overpriced cocktails, music that thumped through your chest. I pulled out a little black dress I hadn't worn since before the wedding. For the first time in ages, I felt attractive, vibrant, alive. That's when I saw him, Derek. He was striking, with messy hair and piercing eyes. He caught me staring, and when he flashed a crooked, knowing smile, my heart skipped a beat. All at once, he appeared beside me, ordering drinks while we strained to hear each other over the relentless thump of the music. I wish I could claim I stayed aloof, exchanged a few polite words, and then dutifully returned home to my husband, the loyal spouse I was expected to be. But the truth is, the blend of vodka sodas and the intoxicating sense of independence went straight to my head. For the first time in a long while, Derek made me feel seen, like I genuinely mattered. We spent the night dancing, swapping jokes, and, without a doubt, engaging in far more flirtation than was prudent. Yet, I managed to rein myself in before anything irretrievable happened, at least on that first evening. The next morning, I awoke with a throbbing headache and a napkin bearing a phone number stashed in my purse. Logic insisted I get rid of it, but instead, I quietly saved the number as D. What followed were weeks of living a double existence. By day, I fulfilled my duties as a faithful wife. After dark, I slipped into another version of myself. Derek and I began with casual coffee meetups, which quickly morphed into lunches and eventually drinks after work. I kept convincing myself our relationship was nothing more than innocent camaraderie. Deep down, though, I couldn't deny the chemistry between us. There was an undeniable charge whenever we were together. He listened as if I were the most fascinating person in the world. Our conversations would flow endlessly, covering my background in psychology, his dreams of writing a novel, our shared passion for obscure indie bands. One night, after a leisurely dinner, we wandered through a park. The sky was painted with the hues of twilight. Derek paused, turned to face me, and softly tucked a stray lock of hair behind my ear. My pulse raced. "Vanessa," he said, his voice low and earnest. "I think I'm falling for you." I knew exactly what I should have done next. I should have stepped back, reminded both him and myself of my marriage, but I didn't. Instead, I leaned in and kissed him. The world seemed to erupt in technicolor behind my eyelids. For the first time in years, I felt completely, thrillingly alive. Later, as I rode home in a taxi, my lips still tingling from his kiss, a storm of guilt and exhilaration churned inside me. I knew I was crossing a line, but I made no effort to turn back. Instead, I only fueled the fire, oblivious to the disaster looming ahead. Picture this. I'm sitting at our dining table, absent-mindedly poking at my salad while Matthew recounted his most recent golf outing. My mind was 1,000 miles away, replaying moments with Derek and the excitement he had sparked in me. Out of nowhere, a wild idea came to me. What if I could have it both ways, maintaining my stable life with Matthew while continuing this electrifying affair with Derek? Without thinking it through, I blurted, "Matthew, how do you feel about open marriages?" The silence that followed was deafening. Matthew dropped his fork, staring at me as if I'd spoken another language. "Excuse me?" he said, struggling to keep his voice steady. I took a deep breath and pushed on. "I've been considering, maybe we could both see other people. It might actually help us." The words landed horribly. Matthew's face went red with a fury I'd never witnessed before. He erupted, raging about trust, vows, and how I could even suggest something like that. I tried to explain, tried to tell him how lonely and invisible I'd felt, but he refused to hear me. The fight dragged on for hours. Plates shattered, doors slammed, and we hurled accusations neither of us could ever take back. In the end, I was left alone, sobbing, as Matthew stormed out. That night, sleep eluded me, my mind replaying every terrible second. By morning, Matthew still hadn't returned. Searching for any distraction, I scrolled through my phone. That's when everything collapsed. Right there, splashed across my social feeds, was a video of Derek and me kissing in the park. It had exploded online overnight. My stomach dropped. Who could have caught us on camera? Mortified, I watched the clip, and the memories came flooding back. One too many drinks, a dare from strangers, a messy, drunken kiss I'd barely recalled through the hangover. My hands shaking, I tried calling Matthew, but he didn't answer. My messages remained unread. As the hours crept by with no word from Matthew, a message arrived from Jenna. "I'm so sorry, V. I never intended for things to get this out of hand." The truth crashed over me. Jenna, my so-called best friend, had been the one to film and post the video. Her betrayal stung even deeper than Matthew's anger. The day continued to unravel. Matthew's belongings had disappeared from our closet. Our joint accounts were empty, the cars gone from the driveway. Just when I thought he had vanished forever, I spotted an envelope on the kitchen counter. My hands trembled as I opened it, dreading what I'd find. "Vanessa, this is what you wanted. You wanted freedom, now you have it. I'm filing for divorce. Please don't contact me or my lawyers. You'll be hearing from them soon. Goodbye, Matthew." The finality of his words blurred before me as tears stung my eyes. In a single afternoon, I had lost not just my husband and confidant, but also the stability of the world I thought I knew. And worst of all, I knew there was no one to blame except myself. I slid down to the kitchen floor, clutching Matthew's letter in my trembling hands, and the weight of my mistake crashed over me. I couldn't see any way to take back what I'd done. The days after he left blurred together, a haze of relentless sobbing, unanswered calls, and growing panic. It was as if I'd been trapped in a nightmare from which I couldn't wake. Each time my phone buzzed, hope surged that it would be Matthew, but it never was. Desperate for comfort, I tried to reach out to Jenna, but she had disappeared completely. The only friend I thought I could rely on had not only broken my trust, but abandoned me when I needed her most. As my emotions spiraled, new, cruel realities set in. At the grocery store, my debit card was declined. Humiliated, I checked my bank account right there in line. My stomach dropped. The account wasn't just low, it was wiped out. My hands shaking, I hurried home and logged into our laptop, checking every account, joint, savings, even the one I'd opened back in university. Each one had been emptied. Matthew had taken it all. Wandering aimlessly through the house, I felt like a stranger in what used to be my home. It wasn't until I noticed the garage that it really hit me. Both cars were gone. The safe in Matthew's office, once filled with our important papers, now sat open and empty. It was as if he was determined to erase every shared memory. Just as I thought the situation couldn't possibly deteriorate further, an email from Matthew's attorney landed in my inbox. The subject line made my blood run cold. Notice of divorce proceedings. I couldn't bear to open it. Desperate, I tried calling Derek for support, but his number had been disconnected. That's when I realized the truth. He must have been as mortified by the viral video as I was. He too had vanished, leaving me alone to pick up the pieces. That night, lying in an empty bed, I stared at the ceiling, replaying every moment. How had my life unraveled so fast? Just a week before, I'd been complaining about the dull routine of marriage. Now, I would have done anything to have that sense of safety back. The next morning, my phone lit up with a flood of notifications. The video had gone viral. Golf tycoon's wife caught in scandalous kiss screamed across the news sites, my face everywhere. The comments ranged from smug satisfaction to pure cruelty. I felt utterly exposed, my pain, a spectacle for everyone. I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to get away but had nowhere to go. With no funds, no transportation, and no friends left to call, I was trapped. Then it hit me. England. The country I'd left years ago, chasing adventure and a better life. With shaking fingers, I dialed my parents' number. It had been months since we last spoke. I'd been too caught up in my own disaster. When my mother answered, I broke down, sobbing as I told her everything. For a moment, there was silence. I braced myself for rejection. But then, my mother's voice, gentle and steady, broke through. "Oh, sweetheart, come home. We'll get through this together." For the first time in days, a small, fragile hope flickered inside me. Maybe, just maybe, I could start again. First, though, I had to face the painful reality of leaving everything behind. As I packed the few belongings I had left, I wondered how it had all spiraled so far beyond my control, and if I would ever be able to make things right. The flight back to England was a blur. I spent the journey fighting back tears, struggling to keep myself composed. When I finally stepped out at Heathrow, exhausted and lost, I saw my parents waiting for me. My mother's face crumpled as she caught sight of me, and she pulled me into a tight hug. I collapsed in her arms, sobbing like a child in the middle of the airport. Back home, everything felt unreal. My old bedroom was just as I'd left it, teen posters on the walls, stuffed animals perched on the bed. It was like stepping into a different era, when my biggest concern was choosing an outfit for the school dance. For days, I barely left the room. I'd wake up, check my phone for a message from Matthew that never came, and drift back into uneasy sleep. My mother would appear with cups of tea, urging me to eat, but I had no appetite. About a week later, my father knocked gently on my door. "Vanessa, love, we need to have a chat," he said softly. I braced myself for anger or disappointment. Instead, he sat next to me on the bed and explained that he and my mother had reached out to a lawyer friend willing to help me through the divorce process, for free. I was stunned. I'd expected judgment, but instead, they offered only support. That's when I finally broke down and confessed everything: the loneliness, the neglect, and the terrible decision I'd made. They listened in silence, never interrupting, simply holding my hands while I let it all out. When I finally ran out of things to say, my mother fixed her gaze on me and said, "You made a huge mistake, honey. But that doesn't define you. You're still our daughter. We love you, and we're not going to let you face this alone." Her reassurance felt like a lifeline thrown to someone lost at sea. For the first time since my world imploded, I felt the faintest spark of hope that I might make it through this. The months that followed were grueling. There was no escaping the consequences. Every day delivered new tabloid headlines, more rumors, and another twist on the story of the golf magnate's betrayed spouse. Matthew had hired a ruthless lawyer, a woman determined to paint me as a scheming, greedy cheater. The press devoured every detail. Still, little by little, with my parents supporting me and weekly sessions with a therapist, I began slowly piecing my life back together. I enrolled in online courses to finally complete my degree in psychology. Volunteering at a nearby women's shelter became my anchor. It gave me a place to put my energy and a way to escape my own turmoil, if only for a while. Out of nowhere, Jenna messaged me. She apologized, blaming that notorious video on her drunken stupidity, insisting she never meant for things to spiral so wildly out of control. Part of me wanted to cut her off for good, to cling to my anger. But I remembered what my therapist had told me. Forgiveness isn't always a gift you give to the other person. It can be what frees you. So I wrote her back. We haven't become best friends again, maybe we never will, but we've started to repair things, even if it's fragile. As for Derek, he disappeared without explanation. That stung at first, but eventually I saw it clearly. We weren't truly in love, just two people using each other to avoid our real problems. 6 months after my escape to England, I received an email from Matthew's attorney. The divorce was official. It was an ending, painful but necessary. I got less in the settlement than I'd hoped. Matthew kept most of what we'd created together, but what I took away from it couldn't be counted in dollars. I left with a sense of understanding. One evening, sitting in my parents' backyard with a cup of tea, watching the sun dip behind the trees, it struck me. All the pain I'd gone through, as awful as it was, had forced me to face truths about myself I never would have uncovered if life had stayed easy. I'd made a mess of things, there was no denying that, but I was trying to grow. I was beginning to heal, and more than anything, I was starting to change. I didn't have a clear plan for the future, but I was certain of one thing. I was finished living for other people's expectations. It was finally time to discover what I wanted, who Vanessa really was. As the first stars appeared in the twilight sky, I felt something unfamiliar settle over me, a gentle sense of calm. This wasn't the end of my story. It was the start of a brand new chapter. This story has come to an end. What's your opinion? Share it in the comments, my friend. And if you like this story, check out other exciting videos on my channel. I'll say goodbye until the next video. See you. He loved her from the very first glance. She had everything: light, silence, depth. Their bond felt unbreakable, as if fate itself had brought them together. The years passed. They built a life, shared dreams, believed in forever. But something subtle began to shift. First, small things, then distance, unfamiliar glances, strange conversations. One question, one pause, one suggestion, and everything started to slip in another direction. He tried to hold on, to accept, to understand, until he found himself on the edge. And then, a meeting, unplanned but necessary. In her, he saw the version of himself he had long forgotten, and in that moment, it became clear. The end is not always destruction. Sometimes, it's a chance to truly begin. Hello, my friend. I'm so glad you stopped by my channel. If you're here for the first time, don't forget to subscribe and share this video with your friends or family. It really helps my channel a lot. Please tell me in which city or country you watch this video. I value every one of your comments. So, let's get started. When I met Elizabeth, I was just a sophomore, still trying to make sense of college and what lay ahead for me. She sat in my English literature class, always up front, eyes fixed on the professor as she scribbled page after page of notes. There was something about the way she listened, so engaged and genuinely interested, that instantly drew my attention. Her presence was impossible to ignore. Neat chestnut hair tucked behind her ears, eyes alert and searching, as if she could see straight through me. Back then, I was hardly the most outgoing person, but there was something about Elizabeth that compelled me to reach out. One afternoon, after class ended, I gathered enough courage to ask if she'd like to grab a coffee with me. To my surprise, she smiled, shy but warm, and agreed. That simple yes changed everything. From that moment, we connected as if we'd always known each other. We spent endless hours wrapped up in conversation, sharing our thoughts on books, our dreams, and the world around us, both realizing this was our first true experience of falling in love. I had never felt that way about anyone before, and I could tell she felt it too. We balanced each other perfectly, fitting together like two pieces of a puzzle, finally united. As the semesters rolled by, our bond only deepened. By the time we reached our last year, we chose to move in together, making a home in a small, cozy apartment near campus. Those were some of the happiest days of my life. We were young, completely smitten, and entirely absorbed in one another. I truly believed what we shared was unique, something destined to last. She was more than just my partner. She was my best friend, my confidant, the center of my world. As graduation approached, marriage felt like the natural next step. I proposed in the same park where we'd had our first date, and she said yes, tears of joy in her eyes. Our wedding was a small, beautiful celebration surrounded by our closest friends and family. Standing beside her, watching her in her white dress, I felt unbelievably lucky to have found someone so remarkable. We both believed that our relationship was rare and unbreakable. In those early years, our marriage seemed to fulfill every hope I had. We built a life together, encouraged one another's ambitions, and dreamed about what the future might hold. We often talked about traveling the world, maybe starting a family someday. Our connection felt almost cinematic, as if we were living out the story of soulmates. But life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it. Looking back, I realized those first few years were a kind of honeymoon. Everything felt perfect because we were swept up in the excitement of being together. We were convinced that nothing could ever come between us. 7 years into our marriage, Elizabeth landed a job at a marketing firm. She was excited, but also nervous. She admitted she felt out of her depth, joining a workplace where she didn't know a single person. Elizabeth had always been more introverted, someone who preferred quiet evenings with a good book to busy social gatherings. The adjustment was tough at first. She would come home and mention how close her co-workers all seemed, like they already had their own circles. I could sense her frustration, even when she tried to downplay it. I did my best to encourage her, reassuring her that it would just take time. I joked that maybe she'd discover another book lover among her colleagues to connect with. Gradually, Elizabeth began to form friendships with a group of women from work. They were a lively bunch, some single, others divorced, a few in relationships, but not married. They were bold and outgoing, so different from the Elizabeth I'd always known. Yet slowly, she found her place among them, and I watched her passion for her job return. Initially, I was genuinely happy for her. Seeing her come out of her shell, make new friends, and gain confidence in her new role was heartwarming. But after a while, subtle shifts started to appear. Elizabeth began staying out after work, meeting her colleagues for drinks or dinner, something she rarely did before. I figured she was just trying to fit in and encouraged her, thinking it was good for her happiness. I tried to believe these changes were all for the best, but those occasional outings quickly became frequent late nights, sometimes even spilling into weekends. The Elizabeth who once cherished our quiet time at home was now seeking out a much more active social life. Other differences cropped up too. She started dressing more stylishly, influenced by her friends' trendy tastes. Not that I minded, but it seemed she was eager to keep up with them. Our conversation shifted as well. She often spoke about her friends' escapades, who was dating who was going through rough patches, or who had just ended a relationship. I tried to stay supportive and involved, but a sense of unease began to grow inside me, as if something fundamental between us was shifting. One night, when she returned from another night out, I quietly asked if we were okay. She smiled, kissed me on the cheek, and assured me she was simply enjoying her new friendships, telling me there was nothing to worry about. Still, I sensed something different in her tone that left me unsettled. As the months went by, that uneasy feeling only intensified. The woman I had loved for so many years, the one who was happiest when it was just the two of us, was gradually becoming someone I hardly recognized. Her presence began to fade, as if she was drifting further away with each passing day, her mind wandering to places I couldn't follow. A sense of dread crept in, anxiety that this new world she was growing fond of was slowly pulling her from me. There was also the matter of her boss, someone I'd never actually met, yet whose name began cropping up more and more whenever we talked. At first, she'd mention him in passing, no more significant than any other colleague. But over time, it became obvious that he occupied a notable role in her professional sphere. She talked about him with genuine esteem, spoke highly of his talents, and seemed to take pleasure in his company in ways she never quite admitted. I did my best to brush off the uneasy feeling, telling myself it would fade as she settled into her new workplace, and that soon we'd find our rhythm again. Yet, beneath my reassurances, a subtle but profound shift had started, one that neither of us could put into words. The distance between Elizabeth and me seemed to stretch further every day. The routines and rituals that once brought us together, our late-night talks, the little habits that made us feel close, began to fall away. She was spending less and less time at home, and even when she was physically present, I could sense her thoughts were miles away. I found myself struggling to remember the last meaningful conversation we'd shared, one that didn't revolve around her job, her co-workers, or some trivial topic. Around this time, I noticed our closeness beginning to erode. We had always shared a strong bond, emotionally as well as physically, open with one another about our dreams and our fears. But suddenly, a wall went up between us. She became more distant, her affection noticeably waning. My attempts to reconnect seemed only to push her further away, leaving me feeling more alone with each effort. She was still there, technically, but she felt unreachable, almost like a ghost of the person I knew. Mentions of her manager became routine, and it was clear that he had become a regular part of her daily narrative. When she talked about him, I could hear the admiration in her voice. She spoke of his intelligence, his leadership, and how everyone at her office respected him. I tried to be supportive, tried to be the partner she needed, nodding along, but deep inside, I felt a sharp ache that wouldn't go away. One night, after yet another late return from a work event, I couldn't hold back any longer. I confronted her, asking outright if there was something going on with her and her boss, hoping she'd laugh at the idea. Instead, she hesitated, a pause that stung. She assured me nothing inappropriate was happening, that they were just close colleagues, that he was someone she confided in at work. But the way she said it, the way she couldn't meet my gaze, made it impossible to accept her words at face value. Not long after, she brought up the idea of opening our marriage, something we had never discussed before. We were sitting together with the TV murmuring in the background when she suddenly suggested it, saying maybe it was time to try something new to bring excitement back into our lives. I was stunned, unable to process what she was saying. She explained that some friends of hers had open marriages, and that it allowed them to explore outside relationships while still staying devoted to one another. It felt as if everything I thought was solid had suddenly shifted. "Elizabeth," who once seemed perfectly content with just the two of us, was now proposing we bring other people into our relationship. I couldn't wrap my head around it. I couldn't understand how we had ended up here, from such deep intimacy to this unfamiliar territory. Still, she continued, telling me that exploring this could actually bring us closer, help us learn new things about ourselves. Part of me wanted to protest, to say this wasn't what I wanted or had ever agreed to. But another part, desperate not to lose her and anxious to see her happy, agreed to consider it. I told her that if this was what she truly needed, we could give it a try, but there had to be clear boundaries. No inviting anyone to our home, no lies, no secrets. She seemed lighter after that conversation, almost as if she'd been waiting to say it, and now felt free. For me, though, that night marked the beginning of something unraveling. I couldn't shake the sense that I was watching everything we'd created start to fall apart. Soon after, with our marriage now open, she began going out more frequently. I tried to convince myself that this was just another obstacle we'd overcome, but deep down, I knew Elizabeth was slipping further away. Each time she left, each time she returned with that distant look, it felt like another piece of our marriage crumbled. Then, one night, she came home and, without even meeting my eyes, told me she had spent time with her manager. She recounted what had happened, insisting it was just a fleeting experience, an experiment. I listened quietly, feigning understanding, but inside, I was shattered. The woman I loved, the one I'd chosen to share my life with, was now with someone else, and I had no idea how to handle it. Things only got worse from there. Our conversations became even more strained, and any sense of intimacy between us faded away entirely. I was doing everything I could to be supportive, to be the kind of husband she wanted, but on the inside, I was breaking, watching our life together come apart at the seams. Opening our marriage changed everything. It felt as though I was living out a story that wasn't my own. I never imagined things would turn out like this, but I clung to the belief that, if it brought Elizabeth happiness, maybe I could learn to accept it. In truth, I was simply trying to hold on to whatever was left of our relationship. Elizabeth threw herself into this new way of living with a kind of energy that left me both bewildered and wounded. She was out more often, meeting new people, and embracing this newfound freedom that seemed to draw her ever further from me. There were countless nights when I found myself restless at home, desperately seeking anything to occupy my mind, but inevitably, my thoughts would spiral back to her. I couldn't help but obsess over her location, who she might be with, and what she could be doing at that moment. This constant state of not knowing gnawed at me, a unique torment I'd never endured before. Determined not to let this anxiety swallow me whole, I resolved to push myself outside my comfort zone and start meeting new people. The attempt was uncomfortable. It felt artificial, as if I were pretending to be someone else entirely. I went on a few dates and crossed paths with several women, yet the sense of connection I was searching for never materialized. Nothing I experienced came close to filling the void left by my history with Elizabeth. Then, unexpectedly, I encountered someone who would completely alter my trajectory. Her name was Julie, a woman who had moved from South Korea to the US several years prior. Our meeting took place at a neighborhood cafe where I sat alone, nursing a cup of coffee and trying to make sense of my tangled emotions. She approached my table and, with an easy smile, asked if she could join me. From our very first exchange, Julie radiated kindness and wit, lightening the mood in ways I hadn't thought possible. We began chatting, and before I knew it, entire hours had slipped away unnoticed. Being in Julie's company felt refreshingly natural. There was no pressure to pretend or put up a facade. Our rapport developed effortlessly, free of masks or reservations. Julie brought genuine laughter back into my world, something I hadn't felt in what seemed like forever. Spending time with her was like surfacing for air after being underwater for too long. For the first time in ages, I felt recognized, appreciated, and genuinely desired, emotions that had faded from my marriage with Elizabeth. Our relationship progressed quickly. What began as friendly conversation over coffee soon blossomed into lingering dinners, late-night talks, and before long, something far deeper. With Julie, I found myself reclaiming aspects of who I was that I'd believed were lost beneath the rubble of my failing marriage. Our connection wasn't just physical, though that element was certainly there. The real difference was the way she made me feel significant, as if I actually mattered. I recognized the precariousness of my situation. I was still married to Elizabeth, still attempting to salvage whatever fragments remained of our bond. Yet here I was, falling for someone else. This wasn't what I'd planned, nor was it something I sought out, but it was undeniable. For the first time in a long while, I felt anchored rather than lost. Inevitably, Elizabeth noticed the changes in me. She started asking about my routines and how I was spending my time, probing for answers I wasn't ready to give. I never mentioned Julie, partly out of fear of causing Elizabeth pain, but also because I couldn't bring myself to relinquish this newfound happiness. Meanwhile, Elizabeth continued her own pursuits. She was still involved with her manager and occasionally with others. She would come home late, and sometimes not at all. I tried to appear unfazed, to keep my emotions in check, but deep inside, her absence hurt more than I cared to admit. Each time she returned with that distant, distracted expression, the gulf between us only seemed to widen. I struggled to maintain a sense of normalcy, to play the role of the faithful husband, but it was clear that our marriage had become only a pale echo of what it once was. I understood we couldn't go on like this forever. I was trapped, living two lives, desperately clinging to the remnants of my marriage, while simultaneously building something new and meaningful with Julie. The stress of living this double life became overwhelming. One evening, after yet another late night on her part, Elizabeth joined me on the couch. For the first time in ages, she looked at me, really looked, as if searching for answers in my face. There was an unspoken understanding in her eyes, a realization that she saw the person I had become, even if she didn't know the details. Perhaps she hadn't discovered Julie, but she knew I had changed. She asked me a single, straightforward question. Was I happy? Her words struck me harder than I expected. In that moment, I knew I could no longer hide, not from her, and not from myself. I admitted the truth, that happiness had eluded me, that I had tried to find it, that something essential between us had shifted. The sadness in her gaze was unmistakable, and I loathed being the one to cause it. But the truth couldn't be unsaid. Elizabeth didn't say much in return. She just nodded, as if she had seen this coming, and then quietly left for bed. I stayed behind in the dark, silent living room, replaying everything that had brought us to this point, uncertain if any road remained that could lead us back. The reality of our situation could no longer be denied. A line had been crossed, one we couldn't retreat from. That night, when Elizabeth asked about my happiness, marked the end of pretending, the moment when all the unspoken words between us settled heavily in the air. Once she'd gone to bed, I sat there alone, overcome by the certainty that we could no longer keep up the charade, could no longer pretend our marriage was salvageable. Within a few days, we attended our first session with a marriage counselor. The suggestion had come from Elizabeth after our difficult conversation on the couch. Though I was unsure, I agreed, clinging to a faint hope that perhaps we could repair the damage, even as I sensed it was already irreversible. The counselor was a kind woman with a gentle demeanor, welcoming us into a cozy office that seemed designed for comfort and honesty. Elizabeth and I sat at opposite ends of the sofa, the space between us feeling impossibly wide, more a symbol than a practical reality. The therapist began by asking us to describe what had brought us there, inviting each of us to share our perspective on our relationship's current state. Elizabeth spoke first, She explained how she'd felt trapped, how she yearned to explore other sides of herself, and how she believed that opening our marriage would foster growth for both of us and, ultimately, bring us closer. But as she spoke, her voice shook and tears welled in her eyes, betraying her regret. The consequences of our choices seemed to hit her all at once. When it was my turn, I found myself nearly speechless, struggling to convey the full extent of my pain and disappointment without sounding like I was placing all the blame on her. I told the therapist about the distance I had felt from Elizabeth, how my fear of losing her led me to agree to an open marriage, and how in trying to save us, I had lost myself. I admitted that I had found someone else, someone who made me feel truly alive again, and that this new relationship had revealed just how far Elizabeth and I had grown apart. As I spoke, I saw the hurt etched across Elizabeth's features. She'd always been the anchor in our relationship, the one who kept everything from falling apart. But in that moment, she looked so fragile, as if the weight of everything was finally too much. She stayed silent, her hands twisted tightly together. When my words faded, she finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "I never stopped loving you," she said, so quietly it was almost lost. There was a time when I truly believed my actions could heal the rift between us. Looking back now, it's clear I was the one who created the gap, who let the distance grow. Her words cut deep, their honesty impossible to ignore, full of longing for a past we'd lost. She explained she'd severed ties with her manager, no longer seeing the co-workers who had influenced her choices, trying to take a step back from everything that had pulled her away. She said she wished we could begin again, recover what had slipped through our fingers. But while she spoke of hope, all I could feel was an emptiness, a hollow space where my love for her had once been. For years I'd tried to be the partner she needed, holding us together by sheer will. But the truth was, I wasn't that person anymore. The damage was done, and I couldn't bring myself to forget or fix the pain of watching her slip away. The therapist turned to me, asking for my thoughts on Elizabeth's desire to rebuild. I hesitated, searching for something true to say. I wanted to acknowledge her honesty, to let her know I heard her regret, but I couldn't force myself to lie. I confessed that, even though I still cared about her, I wasn't sure trust could ever return, or that we could go back to what we once had. At those words, Elizabeth's composure crumbled, and she began to cry. Seeing her break down like that was rare. She usually kept her feelings so tightly controlled. I wished I could reach out, hold her, but I was frozen, unable to close the gap that yawned between us. The therapists did their best to help us navigate the wreckage, but it felt like we were already past saving. As the session ended, Elizabeth pleaded for another chance, asking if we could try to salvage what little remained. She was desperate, ready to do anything to preserve our relationship. But deep down, I knew something fundamental had changed. I was already slipping away, unable to give her the reassurance she needed. I told her I needed distance, that we should both have time apart to really decide what we wanted. It was the hardest truth I'd ever spoken, but it was the only honest thing left. I couldn't say if our marriage could recover, or if I even wanted it to. We left the therapist's office in silence, walking side by side but feeling worlds apart. I could sense the pain and regret emanating from Elizabeth, but alongside it was my own quiet sense of release, a fragile freedom in finally admitting the reality I'd avoided for so long. On the drive home, my mind wandered to Julie, imagining what my life might look like if I let go of my marriage. The thought unsettled me, but it also sparked a flicker of curiosity. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to consider a future without Elizabeth, and I wasn't sure how to feel. That night, we lay in the same bed, but it was as if an invisible wall divided us. The gulf between us felt insurmountable, and I couldn't see a way to bridge it. After that session, things only grew colder between Elizabeth and me. We moved through the house like ghosts, barely interacting. She tried in her own way to fix what had been broken, but each attempt only pushed me further away. The truth was, I couldn't stop thinking about Julie. What I felt with her seemed more authentic, more vibrant than anything I'd experienced in years. Of course, guilt gnawed at me. I knew I was betraying the vows I'd made to Elizabeth, but I couldn't ignore the sense of joy I found with Julie, the feeling of being truly seen and valued, something I'd almost forgotten. Elizabeth, it seemed, sensed the change in me. She became even more distant, withdrawing as if she was slowly accepting the inevitable end of our marriage. We stopped talking about the future, stopped making any plans, and the silence between us grew heavier every day. Then, after a tense, wordless dinner one evening, Elizabeth broke the silence. She asked directly if I was still seeing Julie. Her question caught me off guard, leaving me momentarily speechless. But the look in her eyes told me she already knew the answer. She only needed to hear me say it. I nodded, unable to lie anymore. Yes, I admitted, my voice barely audible. The silence that followed was oppressive. Elizabeth dropped her gaze, tears shimmering on her lashes. She sat quietly for a long time, and when she finally spoke, her voice was a mere breath. "I was afraid this would happen," she said. I had hoped there was still a way back for us, that somehow we could repair the damage. But now I understood it was too late. Her words were like a final blow, but I knew she spoke the truth. We'd both gone too far, caused wounds that couldn't heal. After wiping away her tears, Elizabeth took a steadying breath. "I think you should move out," she said at last. "We both need space to figure out what we really want." A surge of sorrow washed over me, mingled with a bittersweet relief. The decision had finally been made, and there was no turning back. In response to her request, I simply gave a quiet nod, and for a time, we just sat together in silence, each of us absorbing the gravity of what was happening. Over the next few days, I methodically packed up my things and arranged to move into a different apartment, far across town. Both Elizabeth and I tried to keep things courteous, but the underlying tension was unmistakable. We minimized our conversations, only speaking when it was strictly necessary. The entire process was agonizing. It was as if I was witnessing the slow unraveling of something I once deeply valued. When the day came to leave, Elizabeth paused in the doorway, watching as I placed the final box in my car. There was sadness and regret in her eyes, mingled with a quiet sense of acceptance. We both knew our time together was ending. "I never imagined we'd finish like this," she said softly, her voice barely holding steady. "Neither did I replied gently. "I'm sorry for everything, Elizabeth." She managed a nod, wiping away a tear. "So am I." We lingered there, wordless, the silence thick with all that we'd left unspoken. Finally, without another exchange, I got into the car and drove away. As I pulled away from the house that had been ours, a flood of emotions hit me: sorrow, guilt, and a strange new feeling of liberation. For the first time in years, I was leaving behind the life we'd built together, stepping into the unknown. That night, as I settled into my unfamiliar apartment, surrounded by boxes and remnants of my old life, I stared out at the city lights, feeling both unburdened and full of grief. Deep down, I knew I'd made the right decision, even though it offered little solace. Over the next several weeks, Elizabeth and I spoke only occasionally, our conversations brief and marked by a new formality. We were both trying to find our footing, relearning who we were on our own. It was harder than I'd expected, but there was also a faint sense of possibility, a chance to start again. During this time, Julie proved to be an unwavering source of comfort. She listened without criticism and offered her support without pressing me for decisions before I was ready. As my relationship with Julie grew stronger, I was still coming to terms with the end of my marriage, but her presence began to give me hope for what was to come. One afternoon, Elizabeth called. Her voice was calm, though tinged with melancholy, as she told me she had decided to leave the city and start fresh somewhere else. She explained that she needed space, a clean break from the memories of what we'd lost. I completely understood her reasoning. I wished her nothing but the best, and told her I hoped she would find the peace she was looking for. She thanked me, and for the first time in ages, I heard a sense of tranquility in her words. When the call ended, I realized that this truly was the end. Our story had finally reached its last page, and it was time to move forward, to release the past, and to see what might await me. I can't say for sure what lies ahead, but I do know I'm ready to explore who I am beyond the marriage that once defined me. As I embark on this new phase of my life, I carry with me everything I've gained, the regrets, the lessons, and the hope that someday both Elizabeth and I will find the peace and happiness we've been longing for. This story has come to an end. What's your opinion? Share it in the comments, my friend. And if you like this story, check out other exciting videos on my channel. I'll say goodbye until the next video. See you. She thought she had everything under control. He thought he knew who he was living with. One morning, and their entire reality cracked wide open. Behind closed doors, a game was unfolding with stakes far higher than just a marriage. Lies, calculation, betrayal, and a silence so deep you could hear someone's perfect world falling apart. But the most fascinating part began when it seemed like everything was already lost. Hello, my friend. I'm so glad you stopped by my channel. If you're here for the first time, don't forget to subscribe and share this video with your friends or family. It really helps my channel a lot. Please tell me in which city or country you watch this video. I value every one of your comments. So, let's get started. My name is Derek, and I'm 38 years old. I work as a software engineer in San Francisco. For a while, I thought I had it all figured out. A decent life. You get what I mean, right? From where I stood, everything seemed stable. A good job, a cozy apartment, and a wife I absolutely cherished. Her name was Samantha. We had been married for 3 years, and although things weren't flawless, they felt steady enough. There were no major arguments, no serious problems, just the usual ups and downs of married life, or so I assumed. Things began to shift when Samantha suddenly threw herself headfirst into fitness. She had always dabbled in yoga from time to time, but this was different. It consumed her. She hired a personal trainer named Russell, who worked at a fancy gym downtown. Samantha had always been conscious about her appearance, but this was a whole new level. Fitness became her obsession. She was relentless, monitoring every change in her body, posting endless updates on Instagram, tracking every single calorie she consumed. At first, I didn't think much of it. I supported her. I thought, well, at least she's doing something healthy. I even started picking up more chores around the apartment to free up her schedule so she could focus on her workouts without feeling overwhelmed. I wasn't bitter about it. Honestly, it seemed like a positive thing at first. But over time, something started to feel off. It stopped being about wellness. Samantha was chasing attention. She spent countless hours at the gym, more time with Russell than with me. Her social media turned into a non-stop chronicle of her fitness journey. Every post gushed about self-empowerment and starting a new chapter, with strangers flooding the comments, treating her like she was some sort of celebrity. I remember suggesting a date night once, something simple, just for us to reconnect. She barely looked up from her phone. I can't, Derek. I have a session early tomorrow, she said flatly. I need to stay focused, she added. The way she said it hit me hard. It wasn't just that she was busy. It felt like I didn't even fit into her life anymore. What once was a partnership now felt like a one-sided arrangement. Each day, she drifted further away from me. And then came the morning when everything fell apart. I was sitting at the kitchen table, half asleep, sipping coffee before work. Samantha stood across from me, chugging one of her green smoothies, her eyes glued to her phone. Without any warning, she said, "I deserve better." Still half in a daze, I looked up. "Better than what?" I asked. She placed her drink down and met my gaze with a cold seriousness. "This marriage is holding me back, Derek. I'm filing for divorce." For a second, I thought she was messing with me. I let out a nervous laugh, waiting for her to crack a smile. But she didn't. Her face stayed frozen, expressionless. "I've outgrown this," she said, like I was an old jacket she was tired of wearing. "You wouldn't understand." I sat there stunned, unable to form words. This woman, the person I built a life with, was tearing it apart right in front of me, without a hint of emotion. Anger and confusion boiled inside me. "Outgrown what, Samantha? What are you talking about?" She exhaled sharply, irritated. "Derek, I've worked so hard to become who I am now. And honestly, this life doesn't fit me anymore. I need more than this apartment, this routine, more than you." She didn't sugarcoat it. In that moment, it was obvious. In her eyes, I was dead weight, something she had to leave behind. The home and life we built together had become a cage she needed to break out of. She slung her gym bag over her shoulder and walked out the door without so much as a glance back. I sat there, staring at her half-empty smoothie glass, wondering how everything had crumbled so quickly. That entire day at work, I felt like a ghost. I went through the motions, but my mind was stuck on Samantha, looping the conversation over and over. Could she really just walk away like this? Had everything we built meant so little? Sure, we'd had our disagreements like any couple. But divorce? It felt so sudden, too rehearsed, too cold. She must have been planning this for a long time. The days that followed were a haze. Samantha barely spoke to me. She'd stay out late, saying she had extended training sessions. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just about the gym anymore. She was reinventing herself, and I wasn't part of the new version she was creating. One afternoon, I got home earlier than usual. That's when I overheard her on a phone call, laughing. Really laughing. Something I hadn't heard in weeks. I'm so relieved I finally took control. I'm done with him. "He just doesn't get it," she said, her voice light and carefree. I stood frozen, listening. It wasn't just about fitness. She was cutting me out of her life entirely. I was no longer even a consideration in her world. A week later, she sat me down with the final blow. The divorce process was already underway. There were no talks of counseling, no "let's work it out," not even a temporary separation. She had made up her mind long before, and there was no space left for me to fight for us. It was painfully clear. Samantha had already started envisioning her new future, one that almost certainly included Russell. I soon realized they were spending far too much time together, and what struck me most was her utter lack of effort to conceal it. She paraded their bond on social media, flooding her feed with photos for all to see. The comments rolled in, praising her glow-up, as if she were eager for the world to witness how effortlessly she could replace me. It was as though our years together meant nothing at all. Russell had transitioned from just her fitness coach to the center of her entire world, while I was relegated to a mere footnote in her narrative. Even though I was aware of what was happening, it didn't ease the pain. My mind kept circling back to how everything had unraveled. Was I too absorbed in my career? Had I missed the signs that she needed more from me? I tried confronting her, searching for an explanation, but she shut me out, refusing to engage in any real conversation. Eventually, she handed me the divorce papers, and it felt like the ground had crumbled beneath me. It was official. The woman I had once loved, supported, and envisioned a future with had moved on. She wasn't simply leaving me. She was abandoning our entire life together. I, however, was stuck under the same roof, unable to force her out due to legal constraints. Left to sift through the wreckage of my life, I found myself questioning how things had gotten so bad. The more I uncovered about Russell, the more my anger grew. Matthew, my relentless attorney, unearthed some unsettling details about Russell's past. This wasn't his first time pulling this stunt. In fact, it had happened twice before. Russell wasn't just some gym enthusiast hunting for lonely women. He was a professional manipulator. He would target married women, shower them with flattering words, convince them they deserved better, and when they left their husbands and ran out of resources, he would vanish without a trace. This wasn't romance. It was a carefully orchestrated game. His expertise lay in making women feel invincible, only to discard them when they couldn't keep up with the illusions he had created. Samantha, unfortunately, was the perfect target. She craved validation and constant reassurance, and Russell had exploited that need. But it wasn't just Samantha's finances that interested him. Russell had his eyes on mine, too. Samantha intended to walk away with half of everything, my savings, alimony, and even the house. She believed she could stroll into court, portray herself as the wronged party, and leave with a fortune. What she didn't anticipate was that Matthew had gathered every piece of evidence we needed, and I wasn't going to let her steamroll me. The next morning, I found her in the kitchen, blending one of those green smoothies she was always posting about on Instagram. But there was no trace of her usual confident demeanor. She muttered something about Russell being busy with new clients, clearly fishing for a reaction. I didn't respond. She wanted me to care, to ask about it, but I wasn't about to give her that satisfaction. A week later, the bombshell came. Matthew called with updates. Samantha had filed additional claims at the last minute, hoping to extract more from the settlement. She even claimed emotional distress, blaming me for the supposed stress she had suffered during our marriage. In her distorted version of reality, I was the cause of her breakdown. But Matthew was ready. He countered with evidence that Samantha had been draining our accounts for months, manipulating situations to her advantage. He even had screenshots of her Instagram, where she flaunted her new life with Russell, hardly the behavior of someone suffering. And then, just like that, Russell vanished. He ghosted her. No more training sessions, no more texts, no returned calls. He even blocked her on all platforms. I overheard her, pacing in the other room, desperately whispering into the phone, "Russell, please call me back. We need to talk." Eventually, one of her so-called friends spilled the truth. Russell had already moved on, setting his sights on a younger, less complicated woman, someone without the baggage of a messy divorce. Samantha was devastated. Her once vibrant Instagram feed fell silent. The gym selfies, the motivational quotes, gone. She even stopped going to the gym altogether. One evening, she attempted to reignite something. She stood awkwardly in the doorway, her voice shaky. "Derek," she began, "maybe we should rethink all of this. Divorce has been so hard, for both of us." I looked at her, waiting for the punchline. "What are you really trying to say, Samantha?" I asked flatly. She sighed, putting on a sorrowful expression. "I just think we rushed things. We had some good times, didn't we?" I almost laughed in her face. "You're the one who wanted this," I reminded her. "You said I was holding you back, or have you forgotten?" Now that Russell had abandoned her, she was scrambling for a safety net. She tried playing the victim, talking about everything she had given up and how lonely she felt. I wasn't buying it. "You made your choice, Samantha. Now live with it." Her illusionary world was collapsing on its own, and I didn't have to do a thing. Karma was taking care of the rest. Finally, the day in court arrived. Samantha walked in, devoid of her usual bravado. Even her designer wardrobe had been replaced with a modest cardigan, and her attorney, looking more anxious than assured, trailed behind her. Matthew stood beside me, armed with a hefty binder of evidence. I wasn't nervous. I just wanted the truth to be known. Samantha's attorney attempted to paint her as the victim, the wife emotionally abandoned by her neglectful husband. They spun a narrative where my supposed indifference had driven her into Russell's arms. Matthew allowed them to dig themselves into a hole before calmly standing up to dismantle their claims. He presented text messages proving that I had supported her, offering to join her fitness classes, adjusting my work hours, even taking on extra household duties. Then Matthew dropped the bomb. Screenshots of Samantha mocking me to her friends, calling me dead weight while extolling how Russell was her golden ticket to a new life. The final blow? A journal entry Samantha had written herself, outlining her plan to leave me, take as much as she could, and build a future with Russell. One glance at the judge's face told me everything I needed to know. Samantha's game was over. A heavy silence gripped the courtroom. "Mrs. Sutton," the judge said, his voice cutting through the tension as he fixed Samantha with an unyielding stare. "Your claims of emotional distress are unfounded. The evidence shows no pattern of abuse. In fact, it highlights Mr. Sutton's consistent emotional support throughout your marriage." Then came the scrutiny of the finances. Matthew stepped forward with meticulous records in hand, revealing how Samantha had systematically siphoned off thousands from our joint accounts to indulge in her lavish habits. The judge's face hardened with every page. "Mrs. Sutton," he said sharply, "you withdrew over $15,000 from marital funds to finance luxury purchases, fine dining, and personal extravagances. Such actions are irresponsible and a clear betrayal of marital trust." Samantha's lawyer rose to object, but the judge silenced him almost instantly. "The marital home shall be awarded to Mr. Sutton," the judge continued with finality. "Additionally, Mrs. Sutton is ordered to reimburse Mr. Sutton $15,000 for the unauthorized use of shared assets." Samantha's face drained of all color. The bravado she had once paraded evaporated into thin air, and just like that, the proceedings were over. Samantha slumped into her chair, the weight of her defeat pressing down on her. As Matthew and I exited the courtroom, he slapped my back with a grin. "We won," he said simply, satisfaction radiating from him. Days later, Samantha boxed up her things and left. Watching her drive away stirred something inside me. A strange, quiet relief. She had destroyed everything between us, and now she had to face the consequences alone. 2 weeks after the verdict, she showed up at my door without so much as a call. When I opened it, I barely recognized her. Her hair was unkempt, her eyes sunken, and she moved like someone who hadn't rested in days. "Derek," she said, her voice quivering. "Can we talk for a minute?" I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. "What do you want, Samantha?" I asked, my tone calm but distant. Her hands twisted together nervously. I just need to say I'm sorry," she said, stumbling over her words. "I made awful decisions. Russell, he used me. I let him, and I destroyed everything we built." Her apology sounded rehearsed, but the raw desperation in her eyes was unmistakable. She wasn't there for forgiveness. She was there because she had nowhere else to turn. "I'm not sure what you're hoping to hear," I said, my voice steady. "You made your bed, Samantha. You chose Russell. You tried to wreck my life. Now you have to live with that." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Can't we at least be on good terms?" she begged. "Maybe start again somehow?" "I have no one, Derek. I've lost everything." I studied her for a long moment, feeling a cool, immovable certainty settle over me. "Samantha," I said softly, "I gave you my loyalty, my trust, and my love, and you threw them away like they meant nothing. You don't get to come back just because your plan fell apart. That's not how life works." She crumbled in front of me, sinking to the ground in sobs. I turned without another word, went inside, and quietly closed the door behind me, leaving her outside with the ruins of the life she had shattered. Since that day, I've moved on. The apartment feels like home again. No tension, no resentment. As for Samantha, word has a way of getting around. I've heard she's still trying to piece together the wreckage she created. She's lost friends, destroyed opportunities, and is now left facing the consequences of her own betrayal. Sometimes karma doesn't just knock, it tears through like a wrecking ball. For Samantha, it left her alone among the ashes of her own making, and for me, it finally brought the peace and closure that I had been searching for all along. This story has come to an end. What's your opinion? Share it in the comments, my friend. And if you like this story, check out other exciting videos on my channel. I'll say goodbye until the next video. See you